Okay, welcome to Lime Time in Texas, our podcast series on lime. And today I'm going to do something a little bit different. Over the years, I've got a lot of questions asked to me, so I've kind of jotted down a lot of those questions. I'm going to try to do just a question and answer session here today, giving you really short, quick answers to as many questions as I can go through here today. So I want to start off with a little bit of a disclaimer and a comment. The answers that I'm going to provide are not going to be necessarily comprehensive. They're intended to be very concise and to the point as possible. The answers are basically my opinions based on my experience, and so they don't necessarily reflect any official position held by the Lime Association of Texas. Most of the answers that I'm going to talk about today pertain to lime used in soil stabilization or as an additive in hot mix asphalt. If you want more comprehensive answers to some of these questions or want to discuss any of these, please contact me. I'll be glad to go over any questions that you may have. Okay, I'll start off with the first question. Can you use too much lime in soil stabilization? Generally speaking, no. I mean, if you do the design procedure and it says that you're supposed to use, let's give you an example of 6%, and you used 8%, nothing bad happens. It's not going to get overly stiff. It's not going to get, other than wasting money, you may have wasted some of your money on doing that, but it doesn't produce any adverse effects. Now, obviously, if you're supposed to use 6% and you use 20%, yeah, you're gonna see some things happen out there that you don't really want to see happen. You got just way too much lime, but that typically doesn't happen. But generally speaking, it's not a problem. It's not like cement. It doesn't continue to gain strength. The next one is, can you provide some historical perspective regarding lime? Well, basically, lime was developed or discovered several thousand years BC. It was used to make the original mortars that were used in the old world by the Greeks and the Romans. The Appian Way, the Great Wall of China are some examples that I can think about, and a lot of the structures in ancient Europe were used. At that time, there was no such thing as Portland cement, because Portland cement didn't come along until about 1824. So it was the original mortar that was used in the world, and lime was mixed in with fly ash or volcanic ash that came from activity and made some of these things, like you may have even heard of the term Roman concrete. That's where that was all developed. So it's been around since several thousand years before Christ. Okay, what is the process known as a lime garden? So a lime garden is essentially where, I guess I'll give an example here. If you have a vertical construction in particular, and sometimes, and I've seen some that need 7 foot of lime stabilization. Well, what they do in that case is they take it out layers, maybe one foot layer at a time, and usually on that same site, they start treating each layer as they bring it out in piles to add the lime to it and stabilize that soil. And so it takes several days. It takes a day to mix it, and usually a day or two for it to mellow. There's just a process where they lay it out if you have room on the construction site, and then to take those layers out and then just start bringing it back in one layer at a time. Because typically you're not going to construct more than about 1 foot of lime stabilized subgrade at a time. So it's just a way, obviously you can't go in and stabilize 7 foot of material at one time. If you have any questions about that, give me a call. There's got a lot more details on that. Okay, what is the typical depth of lime treatment for soil stabilization? Generally speaking, anywhere between 6 inches and 18 inches. I'd say 6 inches, 8 inches, up to a foot is what's most common that we see. So that one's pretty straightforward. How can you know what depth the lime was mixed? There's a process where you take phenolphthalein and you spray it along dig a hole and into that lime stabilized subgrade and spray the phenolphthalein on there, and it'll turn pink, and it'll show you can measure the depth at where the lime was mixed in. That's the common method of doing it. Can you skip remixing if you use slurry lime instead of quick lime? No, you really don't want to do that. So when we talk about remixing, so you do an initial mixing and you do a mellowing, and then before you do the final compaction, you typically come in and do the remixing. That's always recommended, because at that point also very often you have to add additional water to get it back above optimum again to do the final compaction. So it's almost always that you're going to still have to do that. And at the same time, you check the the depth of mixing, and you check the gradation. So I guess the quick answer to that would be no, you can't skip that. So, what's the main difference between lime and ag lime? Well, lime is calcium oxide that happens when you burn limestone through a kiln at about 2,000 degrees. Ag lime is when you take that same rock, but it never goes through the kiln, and you just grind it up into more or less a fine powder. So that's the biggest difference. That next question is kind of related. It says, what is the pH of lime, and how does that compare to agricultural lime? The pH of lime is right around 12.4. The pH of agricultural lime is right around 8, somewhere in that range, and it's used to adjust the pH of crops. So we call it ag lime. Unfortunately, a lot of times in the agricultural world, they'll just call it lime. 99% of the time when a farmer's talking about lime, they're talking about ag lime and not real calcium oxide. So you got to be careful there. Okay, our next question is lime a pozzolan? No, lime is calcium oxide, and by definition, a pozzolan is something that has silica and alumina in it that reacts with calcium and water to form a calcium silicate hydrate, calcium aluminate hydrate. So lime is not a pozzolan. It has to be mixed with the pozzolan to form pozzolanic cement. So the pozzolan would be the clay, or the pozzolan would be something like fly ash. How do you calculate how much lime you need? The easy answer on this, if you go to our website at www.limetexas.org, we have 3 different lime calculators on there. It tells you how much lime you need. So the first thing you do is you have to go through that Eads-Grimm test procedure, figure out exactly what's specified. So if somebody's already done that and they say you need, say, 6% lime in this case, you go plug that number in on that calculator. You also need to know the unit weight of the soil and what area you're going to spread that on, or what depth you're going to spread that on. If you put those inputs in there, it will calculate how many tons of lime that you need for that project. Where do you find the list of approved lime suppliers in Texas? Well, TxDOT has a list. The TxDOT's Materials and Test Division has their what they call the Material Producer List, or MPL. And so if you go on TxDOT's website and look up the MPL, it'll show you who all is approved to supply lime in Texas. What kind of soil strength can I expect when I use lime stabilization? Generally speaking, if you use lime stabilization, you're going to get between 50 and roughly 200 psi unconfined compressive strength initially. Over time, that will continue to grow. And like I said, I've kind of mentioned before in some other podcasts, we've seen it up over 700 psi unconfined compressive strength of lime layers that have been in place over the years, because that pozzolanic reaction is going to cause it to continue to increase in strength. The next one is, what exactly is a lime series? Lime series is, if you go to TxDOT's test procedure 121E part 3, that is a lime series to where you add different amounts of lime to a soil, to whatever soil that you're going to use in the project. It's mixed with water also, and to get that up to where it produces a repeatable pH of 12.4. So that's, some people call it a lime series. The technical name, it was after the 2 guys that developed that procedure, Eads and Grimm, is the Eads-Grimm test procedure. So that's essentially what a lime series is. What are the pros and cons of commercial lime slurry versus quicklime slurry? I will mention, if you go online, you'll see we have another podcast video that explains this in more detail, but commercial lime slurry versus quicklime slurry, really the only difference is where it's made, whether it's made on the job site or whether it's made at a terminal, a permanent terminal. The advantages of commercial lime slurry is that you call up the producer and you say, hey, send me lime today. If you send me a truckload, anyway, they're going to just deliver that lime ready to use. Quicklime slurry, you set up porta-batch plants usually on a job site, and you bring in quicklime, and typically the contractor is going to supply the water and mix it in that porta-batch plant. So it ends up being the same product as lime slurry that's going to go in the ground. So there's kind of advantages and disadvantages. I'd say the quicklime slurry is used on some very big, large remote projects. If you have a very small project and you only need 1 truckload, you're probably just going to order commercial lime slurries. When using lime for soil stabilization, is the rule of thumb of when to add water? think I've touched on this one a little bit earlier, but the rule of thumb I use is we call the meatball test. Is take the soil, squeeze it in your hand, form it into the shape of a meatball. If it falls apart when you open your hand and crumbles, you still need to add more water. If you squeeze that thing really hard and it starts just dripping water and gets mud all over your hand or squishes out of your hand, you probably got too much water. If you can squeeze it really hard into your hand, make that little meatball, and you get one little drop starting to form out of the bottom of your hand there when you see it dripping out, that's about right. So that's kind of the rule of thumb that we generally recommend. The next question is, does the Lime Association of Texas provide pricing quotes? I get a lot of calls and a lot of people sending in to our website requesting prices. I personally don't, as a nonprofit, I cannot provide any information on pricing or availability or anything like that online. I would refer all of those to the Lime Producers of Texas. So if you send me a quote or you send it into our website, I forward that on to all of our Lime Associates and some Lime Sales Associates, and one of them will contact you to give you pricing. You can also give me a call at any time and I can give you the information of who you need to speak to. So, last question I have now is, how many tons of lime does a typical slurry truck hold? So a slurry truck, whether it's coming from a commercial lime slurry or from a porta-batch plant out on a job for quick lime slurry, it's a little over 9 tons. Rounded off, I'll say between 9 and 9.5 tons is about what you would typically get tons of usable lime on that project for each truckload. That's all I have for today. Appreciate your time. If you got any other questions, feel free to contact me at any time. Thank you. Thank you for watching this episode of our podcast. If you want to learn more about the use of lime, reach out to us on our website at limetexas.org. You can also email me at dalerand@limetexas.org. And please follow us on LinkedIn and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you for watching.